Hi everybody. I don't normally make gaming news videos, but some news has dropped today which has the potential to seriously impact me and is also bound to impact a lot of other developers as well. So I wanted to talk about it. Unity have announced a new fee, the Unity runtime fee, which is going to take effect in January. And it affects all Unity developers, even people that have already released their game, even people who released their game many years ago. Here's how it works. Unity is now going to charge a fee of 20 cents every time somebody installs your game on a new device. Now, for this to apply, you do have to pass a threshold. I'm personally using the Unity Plus license, which means that I am falling into this box. And to be honest, so are probably most indie devs. If your game has earned $200,000 in the last year and has had at least 200,000 lifetime installations, then you're above the threshold. And from that point onwards, as we can see in this diagram, you'll be charged 20 cents every time the game is installed on a new device. Now, on the face of things, maybe this doesn't sound all that unreasonable. You know, $200,000, that's a lot of money. And 20 cents, that's not much money at all. So, why can't Unity charge a little bit extra for the services they provide? Well, there's a lot of complicating factors that makes this charge actually a lot more scary than you might think. The core problem is that it's based on installations, not based on revenue. So for comparison, the Unreal Engine, which is Unity's big competitor, it charges you 5% of your total revenues after you've earned at least $1 million on your game. Now, that can work out to be a lot of money, especially in the long run if your game is successful. But the difference is that they're taking a cut of your revenues, that is, a cut of money that you've already earned. But when Unity charges you for an installation, you're being charged whether or not you've earned any money. So let's just, think through some of the concrete consequences and scenarios here that can happen to you once you're over the threshold. If somebody bought your game a long time ago and they've now got a brand new computer and they reinstall their old games on their new computer, that's 20 cents right there. If you decide to port your game to a new platform, maybe mobiles or consoles, which is something that Unity really advertises as a benefit of their engine, then all those new installations are also going to be hit with fees. And this is particularly a problem when you think about mobile games, right? If you make a mobile port of your Steam game, well, the expectation is on mobile that the game will be free to play, at least at first, and then maybe you can microtransaction to buy the rest of the game, to buy the full game. And in this case, you're going to be paying 20 cents for each install of the game, even if you're charging $0 for the game, and only making money back on the small percentage of users that ever monetize. So you could end up losing money on the average player of your game. And this also applies to bundles. If your game is included in a bundle like the Humble Bundle, where people buy a bunch of games for, less than $1 each, perhaps even just a few cents each, then you could actually lose money on every sale of your game, not just every download, at least within that bundle. And if you're in a charity bundle where the proceeds will go to charity, then this is even worse because, you're not earning any money from giving out the game to these people, but you're still paying all those fees. And this gets even more murky with services like Xbox Game Pass, where people pay a monthly subscription and then, they get to play a bunch of different games that month. If your game is included in the Xbox Game Pass or a similar kind of Game Pass, then you're going to have to pay a fee for every single person who has Game Pass who decides to install your game. Something else to consider is Unity has always positioned itself as being pro-indie. They want to help new aspiring indies learn to program, break into the gaming market, and get their career started. And I fell into that bucket too. Something to consider is that new developers are also much more likely to sell their games for cheap, right? There's a lot of games like this on Steam which are sold $10 or less, even $4 or less, And that's before you apply discounts. And Steam, as you know, has a lot of discounts. And so these games that are being sold for just a couple of dollars, they're going to be disproportionately hit by having to pay Unity 20 cents every time the game is installed. And in the extreme case, imagine you've made a Steam game or a mobile game that sells for $1. And then you pay, sales tax of 10-20%, then Steam takes 30%, then, you're left with maybe 50 cents and Unity takes 20 of it for an install and then maybe another 20 for another install. You could be left with basically nothing. But it all gets actually worse than this, because people who pirate games also install games. And this means that every time your game is pirated, you're going to be slapped with a 20-cent fee. And it goes even further than this, because while you're only charged for installs on new devices, there exists a way to fake the existence of a computer device. This is called a virtual machine, and they have all sorts of legitimate uses. And anyone can create virtual machines with just a little bit of tech know-how. There's even programs that will spin up large numbers of them for you automatically. It would therefore be possible for a suitably motivated, tech-savvy gamer to spin up 100 virtual machines and install your game 100 times, hitting you with a $20 fee every time they did this. The people who came up with this idea have dubbed it install bombing, sort of likening it to review bombing, where you leave loads of negative reviews on a game you don't like in a coordinated way. But in this case, you need fewer people if they're tech savvy, and they're actually directly sapping the revenues of the developer instead of just hurting their online presence. So, it's a big concern that this kind of thing could be possible. So, okay, that was a bit of an information blast there, but the key message I'm trying to get across here is that charging people based on installations rather than on revenues is a problem that's just fraught with all sorts of different issues, and there's been a lot of backlash, as you might expect, from developers about all of it. Even though it's been less than a day, there's a lot of people angry about it, and Unity has since released an FAQ with some clarifications. So first of all, let's look at this. They've replied to the piracy problem. Presumably this also covers the install bombing problem. They've said, "We already have a fraud detection practice in our ads technology, which is solving a similar problem. So we'll leverage that know-how as a starting point. We recognize that users have concerns about this, and we will make available a process for them to submit their concerns to our fraud compliance team." So, from what I understand here, it sounds like the developer, the onus will be on the developer to try and somehow keep track of how many of their installs are fraudulent, how many of them are pirates, and how many of them are legitimate. And then if you have concerns that there's been people pirating your game, you submit something to the fraud compliance team at Unity, and then they will process it and hopefully give you your money back. Personally, I don't have a lot of faith that a system like that is going to accurately charge people, especially when what we're really talking about here is Unity internally investigating themselves to see if they're overcharging you. I have also managed to find this article which says that Unity have clarified that if you're part of a bundle like Xbox Game Pass or you're in a charity bundle, then you're not going to be charged for the install. Although, as this article rightfully points out, it's not exactly clear how they're going to know which installs come from charity bundles or Game Passes and which don't. Even if this system works, it's probably going to result in a bunch of admin work for the developer to try and notify, which keys are which type. It sounds like a red tape nightmare to me. Now, I'm sure Unity would try to justify this whole new fee structure by pointing to the thresholds and saying, hey look, if you don't already earn loads of money on your game, then you're going to pay nothing extra. So, no harm, no foul. And I understand the concept behind that. I'm not against the principle of paying a fee to a company that provides you a service. In business, we've got to pay fees to all sorts of people for loads of different reasons. It's just a fact of life. But let's try and make this more concrete. Imagine that you're a new indie developer and you're selling your first game on Steam for $10. a lot of people who haven't developed games yet, I think, might be surprised to learn just how many times your revenues get sliced and diced already for various reasons. Let's take this starting point of $10 and let's assume that nobody is buying your game on discount, even though that's obviously not how Steam works. I'm trying to keep this a simple example, so let's say that everyone buys it for the full asking price of $10 on Steam. First of all, there's sales tax. You have to pay, governments all across the world money on things that you sell, so that $10 go down to $8 or $9. Then there's the platform cut. Steam takes 30%, and so does Apple on the Apple Store, so does, Google on the Play Store. 30% is what people take. So that 8 or 9 comes down to, let's say, 6. So we're left with $6, and this is your actual revenue into your company. Now there's the publisher cut. And obviously not every game has a publisher, but a lot of them do, for the very simple reason that publishers, if you're a small indie developer, you're already juggling so many different jobs that having a publisher to do things like, get reviews for the game, get it out there, help market it, it's really helpful. So a lot of people have publishers, and they're going to take a cut which, really varies depending on the games. There's a big sort of margin of uncertainty here, but on the low end, maybe they just take a third. On the high end, maybe they take all the way up to 80% of your money. So let's just say somewhere between $2 and $4 is what's left over after your publisher has taken their cut. Now we have the big one, costs. Let's just keep it simple and say that this game cost us nothing to make. So while you were developing it, you didn't eat, you didn't pay rent, you didn't, buy new hardware or software for developing, you spent nothing. And so once you've then paid corporation tax, income tax, all that sort of stuff, you could be left with 10 to 30% of the original money that was spent on the game. Now, if you're selling other copies, that's fine. Completely fine, you can live on that. And I'm not trying to make this into a rant about the gaming industry as a whole. In business, a lot of people are involved in the process of distributing games, and they need a cut just as much as I do. But here's the problem. When we are talking about this new Unity fee, that gets added in at this stage in the process. It gets added into costs, and it's a variable cost of 20 cents per install. And when you compare that to the $2 to $4 that we might be earning at this point, actually that can be a really significant chunk of your income. And then if we add in Steam sale discounts, people are buying the game for maybe just $5, this starts to become a very large percentage of your revenue. And if we assume that you're going to have other costs as well, like paying, to live while you develop the game, there's a real chance that you could end up losing money on some sales. And that's all before we even consider the risks that are associated with piracy under this system. So in my personal case, my game Patch Quest has reached 182,000 total key activations on Steam. So this includes all the people who bought the game on Steam, along with everyone who got the game elsewhere, like in a bundle or a giveaway or for review purposes. This is a lot of installs. When you factor in that some of these people will have installed the game on 2 devices, I'm probably already over the 200,000 threshold, although I couldn't actually find the number of how many total installs I have anywhere. I did look, I can't seem to find it, which is a little bit concerning. But let's assume that I'm over the threshold. If, for the sake of argument, every single person who already owns the game decided to install it on a second PC, I'd be hit with a charge of $36,400. Now, it's obviously not likely that this would happen. People have a limited number of PCs in their house. But some people will install it on a second PC, and how many people is that? Is that 5% of all the players? Is it 30%? I have no idea, honestly, which means it's very difficult for me to plan ahead. My costs next year could vary wildly based on the number of installs the game gets. And that's before we even consider brand new customers who might buy the game on a deep discount somewhere. I've been using the Unity engine for 8 years now, and I've made a bunch of game dev videos in that time to show how my game was built and just generally saying very positive things about the engine and encouraging people to use it. Until yesterday, if someone came to me asking, how do you become an indie dev? I would have told them, learn C#, learn Unity. It's the best way to get started. The engine isn't perfect, but it's still an amazing tool for almost all kinds of indie games you might want to make, and it's amazing for the game dev community as a whole. But despite all of that, I'm now seriously considering jumping ship. The most baffling thing about all of this is that there's a very simple and obvious alternative. As I said earlier, the Unreal Engine charges you a small percentage of your revenues when you go above a threshold. And while this money could still end up being a significant payout in the long run, it avoids all of the problems that I've talked about in this video because it's charging you based on money that you've actually earned. I really hope that Unity rethinks this plan and comes up with a more sensible alternative, for example by copying Unreal Engine. But at this point, even if they just put everything back to exactly how it was before, this has still seriously shaken my trust in Unity as a company. It would be one thing to say, look, this is going to apply to all games developed in the future, because then developers can at least consider the terms and weigh up the pros and cons and then decide that they'll agree to this fee system. But these changes are going to apply to all games, even ones that released years ago. These games were developed on a completely different set of assumptions of Unity's fee structure and had no way of knowing that things could change so suddenly. There probably is a clause somewhere deep in Unity's terms and conditions that, says something like, we retain the right to change what we charge you at any time and with no warning. Big companies love to have that kind of future-proofing in their legal small print. But, to actually act on this and pull a switcheroo like this on developers, it just makes me wonder. Is this the last time they're going to change their terms? Or are they going to mix it all up all over again in a few years' time? Developing video games takes years of effort, and when you choose an engine to develop your game, you're putting a huge amount of trust into that engine. Jumping ship to another one might be possible when you're just starting up on a new project, but the deeper into development you get, the harder this becomes, until at some point it would be almost unthinkable to just rip up everything and start again in a new engine. So this means that as you get further into development, your game is gradually going to end up dependent on the engine it's built in. And if you can't trust that company to honor the expectations they set when development began, then who knows where you could end up. Switching to Unreal Engine will require programming in C++ instead of in C#, which is a pain. But it also comes with a lot of other benefits if you're trying to make a high-end game with realistic 3D graphics. On the other end, there's Godot. It's a lesser-known engine, a newer engine, that does support C# and is also completely open source, meaning there's no fees to pay them at all. It's best at making 2D games, at least, at this point in time, but I make 2D games, and so I'm seriously considering switching over. I always used to think that it was just too much effort to learn a whole new engine when I'm already so used to the Unity engine, but sitting here today, it seems a lot more attractive than it ever has before. So take this as a cautionary tale, I guess. If you're just starting out with game development today, I'd seriously suggest you check out Godot. And as the community grows, the engine is bound to get better, and who knows, maybe someday it'll surpass Unity in its feature set. Well, whether it does or whether it doesn't, one thing I can feel confident about is that I do feel a bit like a mug for putting so much faith in Unity for so many years. This story is obviously still evolving. If Unity does row back on this plan or otherwise change things, then I'll leave a pinned comment in the comment section below, and I'd also like to hear your thoughts. Am I overreacting here, or am I right in saying that this has just not been thought through and really needs to change? If you're one of my regular viewers, you're probably aware that Patch Quest has now finished development, so I want to thank everybody who has supported me over the years as I built that game. And I am working on a brand new game right now, and I'm excited to show more of it in the coming months. Remember to check out the Discord channel if you want to jump in right away. And I've now also got investigating the Godot engine on my to-do list, so stay tuned for all of that. And as always, thanks for watching.